Swami Kriyananda, as a direct disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda, Swamiji, as a direct disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda, felt a great obligation, an explicit commission, as it were, from his guru, to carry the teachings as far and as wide as he could. If you look at the 150 books that Swamiji wrote in the course of his lifetime, it ranges from secrets for women to money magnetism, to education for life and superconscious living. It goes all over in all directions, spiritualizing the arts. And Swamiji used to say sometimes, he said he was perfectly aware of the fact that many people would never be convinced or never be interested in the spiritual path. But he liked to ignore that fact and pretend that if he just could explain it clearly enough, absolutely everyone would be convinced. He said it provided the proper incentive for him. And so he was constantly experimenting with different ways of doing it, including the long cycle of time when he let go of the name Swami Kriyananda and became J. Donald Walters, which was his given name, but he decided that Kriyananda was an obstacle to the truths he was trying to put across, and he didn't want there to be any obstacles. Many of us, including me, argued intensely against him doing that, to the point where many years later he said, "I would have done it sooner," looking right at me, "but you thwarted me," is what his words were, which was a mark of how respectful he was, even to a callow youth who was not really, had no reason for it, I just didn't like it. In fact, he said, "You often thwarted me." That's what he said to me. I offered him a universal apology, which he accepted without the slightest qualification, so I guess I really needed to give it to him. Over the 40 years that I knew Swamiji, he always gave us young ones the illusion that our point of view was valuable. It took me about 30 of those 40 years to realize he was just being nice to us. He did it so convincingly that I actually felt useful to him. Isn't that wonderful? How much true love can really change our way of thinking. But in any case, Swamiji was always trying to think of a new way to explain it. And every time he came up with a new way of explaining it, he was absolutely convinced that this was the one that was going to work. This was going to be what they call in music the crossover hit. It was going to cross from the New Age into the mainstream and be a national bestseller, and everyone would love it. And invariably, it didn't happen. But invariably, he never lost faith that it was going to happen. I feel that much of what Swamiji was doing has to do with the illusion of time, that the day will come. Many, many great souls are not recognized in their own lifetime. You can think of artists and musicians and philosophers also, because they're ahead of their time, way ahead of their time. In fact, Swamiji was proudly out of step with this culture. He didn't see anything in this culture to be in step with, basically, and wanted to be way out in the front, leading the parade. Because that's what we're always working with. We're not working with what we already have, and each of us individually or in the work that we're doing, what good does it do to define what already is in existence? Even if you just think about the very nature of energy and time, everything is flowing. Swamiji remarked once that if you're going to judge yourself, which he added parenthetically, which I don't recommend, he said you can never look at the present reality, because by definition, where you are already standing, by the time you're standing and can look at it, it's past you. Because everything changes in that moment. We have a new understanding. We become a minute older. Everything in the astrological world has shifted just a little bit. And this moment has come and this moment is gone. So we can't really ever seize it and box it in. What we are is the flow of energy and the direction that it's going. Because that determines, just like we're in a car, you see a scene and it's there and you like it, but immediately you're already past it. We see a quality in ourselves and we like it, but immediately we're moving on from it. So it's our aspirations. It's where we're putting our energy where our heart is. That's what really defines who we are. And by that token, also the optimism of our reality can be greatly expanded. Yesterday we had a wedding here in this beautiful altar, which our altars are often beautiful on Sunday mornings. This one was set up for the wedding, which is why it's a little more elaborate and wedding-esque than it usually is. And the couple that were getting married were not born and raised at Ananda, but it brought to the community for the event a number of young people now who used to be babies, and caused those of us who are old enough to remember when they were babies, to reflect on what a dream this world is and how quickly everything just shifts over. And now you sort of watch a whole next generation of people making their marriages, beginning to have their babies, and just sort of watch this whole story go. It's very important, even when you're young, to have a picture of the whole flow. It's extremely important. How many incarnations we have done this, and how strangely the illusion comes over our mind that this is the first time. And all that excitement of beginning is rarely tempered by a memory of the end. But when it begins to penetrate even a little, I know when I was 18 years old, a major incentive for me to come on the spiritual path was the inevitability of death. And I pictured death, as one always does, as coming at a ripe old age. I remember my aunt, who died at the age of about 89, and the last few years of her life I visited her often, and it was just so amazing to me to just look at her, by that point extremely withered body. And she was a little twisted, and her face with just a mass of wrinkles, and there was so much life experience that had sort of gone under the bridge through that particular body. One of my friends, whose mother lived on much longer than anyone anticipated she would, the woman had been a farm wife in South Dakota, and her daughter remarked she was so frugal, she was not going to give up that body until she had squeezed every last bit of use out of it. And you can sort of see that, there's a little more karma that it's possible to experience before I discard this. Swami Kriyananda remarked that we shouldn't give up our bodies lightly. And I mean by that we should struggle against disease and against hardship, because it takes a long time to get a human body. It takes a long time to grow up and find your path and figure out where you're going to be and what you're going to do. And you will reincarnate again, but then you have to start all over. Yesterday at the wedding, there was a 7-week-old baby, the kind of baby that was still like this, and you just saw this little thing, just barely in control of anything like this, and you just think, oh my gosh, all that you have in front of you, all that it's going to take you just to sort out your basic systems, to get out of diapers, to learn to feed yourself, to be able to walk on your own, all of those steps. So once we have one, we should not give it up so lightly. And I watched my aunt with those bright little eyes, and she just sort of became reduced to these very bright blue eyes, which had always been her salient feature anyway. Just peering out, she became more and more bird-like. But you could just feel in there, and she wasn't a spiritual person, but she was a very energetic and intelligent woman. You could just feel this long trajectory of experience, going back a long distance and going forward, who knows where she was going to go from that point. So in our scripture today, the scriptures are telling us, that there's a time and a place for everything, and that the ripening of this spirit cannot be hastened merely by someone else's willpower. We see our children, we see our young people, we so want them to skip all the necessary learning stages that we had to go through. It's just so tempting. Can't we just, and Swamiji looks at us, and he has overcome his impatience. But I remember him saying to me once, he says, yes, it's tempting sometimes to think, if this one only had these qualities and that one only had these qualities, and if this one could be like that, he said, better not to go there. Just don't even start down that road. Every one of us has this extremely strange and individualistic knot of our unique and special confusion that we think is really important and necessary to hold on to. And we befriend each other by always understanding that there is a step forward, but that step forward is really different for each of us. I know Swamiji's genius as a leader was always able to tell what was a realistic next step. And for that reason, whenever you had an encounter with him, you always felt encouraged. It wasn't that everything he asked was easy, and it wasn't even that one succeeded every time. Sometimes he would put in front of you, he was very intuitive. He would put in front of you a challenge you couldn't meet because the necessary realization was not so much success as self-honesty. So sometimes being given a challenge that you couldn't meet forced you back to a realistic appraisal of yourself. So it isn't always just objective what's in front of you. It always has to be, who am I, where am I going, and how am I going to get there? And the scriptures tell us, don't waste high truths on people who can't accept it. And I was thinking of this in obvious terms when we talk to each other, but I was also realizing that it's really a teaching for working with ourselves. Of the vast number of things that are possible on the spiritual path, Master actually said that you have to do, I believe it's 1/100th of what he taught. And he said, and that will be enough for you to realize God. Except everybody takes a different part. And therefore that's why he had to teach so much and in so much variety. And the ability for us to be able to stand calmly in our own capabilities and really say, this is for me, this is what I can do. Because if we impose upon ourselves realities that are unrelated to our actual karmic ability to face and succeed at them, then those teachings lose their efficacy. We become confused, let me put it like that. In the Gita, it's put this way. These are the qualifications for understanding spiritual teachings. Do not teach to those who lack self-control or devotion, to those who are willing to serve, to those who are not interested, and to those who mock these teachings. So I was looking at those just from the point of view of guidelines for the devotee. At a certain point on the spiritual path, it has to become important enough to us that we are willing to discipline ourselves to it. Even though we teach that the divine light is natural to us and that bliss is our true nature, it's self-evident that our energy is drawn in so many different directions. We're always looking for a way to distract ourselves. Fillers is what Master called it. And our society absolutely specializes in fillers, doesn't it? It's just like it's a bazillion-dollar business to find ways to make sure, as my friend put it, that we are never alone with our thoughts for a single moment. And in fact, the conspiracy of our society is not merely to fill the space, but to agitate the space around us. I was at some store, I can't even remember where I was, just the other day, and whatever I was shopping for was so simple, and it was such a mundane shopping experience, and the music that was playing, the sound that was coming out of the loudspeakers, acted as if we were all like marching off to war and needed to be agitated to the nth degree, especially in a violent manner, in order to buy toothpaste and aspirin or whatever it is that I was particularly buying. And I was conscious of just the assaulting effect of that agitated sound on the effort to maintain some level of equanimity. And I was falling into what I'm inclined to fall into, which is a tendency to storm the manager's office and give him a strong piece of my mind, which is going to have no effect. I speak from experience when I say that. It will have no effect. Absolutely none. Even when I appeal to his economic interest, it will have absolutely none. But then I realized I should be able to rise above this. I ought to be able to just have my own inner reality regardless. I would remember being with Swamiji once at a very noisy place. It must have been a church in Europe. I can't think of where else it would have been. And it was extremely noisy for some reason. And we were trying to meditate. And we were becoming a little agitated by the noise. And he just looked over at us very calmly and said, "You should be able to concentrate over it." And it was an interesting realization. What am I tuned into? I remember when David and I went to the bar mitzvah of his nephew back east, and like everything these days, whatever sacrament is involved, whether it's wedding or bar mitzvah or whatever, is just the prelude to the party. Then the party started, and the music was so deafening. And usually I become very agitated, and David was quite solicitous of me. But it actually crossed over, that it was so deafening that it became like incidental. I couldn't even hear it anymore. It had just gone beyond noise to just be silence in a strange sort of way. But I was also very pleased with myself. Because look, we are always the master of our own reality. And this is the society we live in these days. And it's extremely easy to become annoyed by it. Effortless to become annoyed by it. Easy as pie to become annoyed by it. But this is the society, this is the time we've chosen to incarnate, and there's a purpose here. There's a powerful contrast that we have to work with. And unless we are willing to exercise that self-control, to hold ourselves on the spiritual path, there's no point in pretending that we're going to get anything from it. But the greatest way to have that self-control, the Gita is talking about, is devotion. And this is what David was also reading today. Devotion. What does devotion mean? It means that something is more important to us than anything else. We have devoted ourselves to something. We think of devotion as love, but you see the love follows naturally. We've devoted ourselves to something. We've devoted ourselves to our spiritual life, to our love relationships, to the raising of our children, to the accomplishment of our career ambitions, to the development of art, to the service of others, which is also mentioned here. But above all, we are devoted to it. And unless we have made that decision, really, this teaching will just pass over our heads, and the whole incarnation will go by, and it will have been nice, but what will we have done unless we have chosen deliberately and then given our heart to it? I remember a woman at Ananda wrote Swamiji once and said, nothing draws me. She was talking about what kind of work she was going to do. She said, nothing draws me, nothing interests me. And Swamiji said, you're waiting for it to give to you. He said, first you have to give energy. You have to give your energy. And then all of a sudden you'll find the magnetism is there. And so we have to become devoted. And it isn't, as I was saying, it isn't effortless. It takes self-control. When you see people of great accomplishment, invariably they have made the decision to accomplish. And so in the spiritual path, every day we have to say, even when it's so easy to find fault. I'm in the store, I can't stand the noise that they're playing over. All I want is the toothpaste and the aspirin, and I can run this whole scenario about how they all ought to be living differently. And where does that take us? How does that work for us? What is the end of that road? I mean, we all know the end of that road. And then you get older and older, and your brain gets more and more stuck there. Like that, right? Is that where we want to be? Is that where we want to be when we're children again? Just complaining and whining about everything? Somebody do something, fix it for me, make it different, make it different. Nobody's listening. Maybe you noticed that already. We have to be devoted to the evolution of our own consciousness and the joy of our own hearts. And every decision has to be weighed against those two things. The expansion of my own consciousness, the joy of my heart. Will this contribute or will this take away? Otherwise, the teachings are wasted on us. We can be as clever as we want with them, but without the devotion to them and the self-control to follow it. And then the Gita tells us, and also those who are willing to serve. I had a very interesting conversation with a friend who's devoted to the spiritual path and has a lot of self-control. So those two elements were in place. But after a certain conversation, he just said to me, I'm just not into service. I've never been into service. And I was just like, I have to say, I was stunned. I had to literally say in the conversation, just give me a minute. I have to adjust to this. I said, this is a reality I've never even considered. And strangely, I thought back to my motivation for being on the spiritual path. And this was before I was 18 when I was introduced to self-realization. One of my greatest frustrations is that I felt I had so much to give, and I don't mean that I had so much positive to give, I just had so much energy inside of me that wanted to be useful, and all causes seemed pointless, the ones that I saw. So it was, as I called myself, and truly I was a fanatic without a cause, ready to give myself 100%, but nothing to give it to. And so when I discovered self-realization, first, at least then I had an inward cause. And then when I came to Ananda a few years later, one of the things I loved about it, the first time I met Swamiji, was that he was founding this community. That was good, but even better, he was founding a retreat. So everything that we had there could also be given out to others. And from the very start, that's where I was. I cooked the meals for all the guests who came from the first day. Because service is joy. It was so self-evident to me. But I realized, and the Gita makes it clear, it's not self-evident to everyone. Some of us have to go through the stage which is described in the Festival of Light. The little bird, and for those of you who are new, you'll hear it in a few minutes, the little bird gets the power of flying out on its own, and he's been told to share with everyone. But he says, why? The more I have for myself, the better I feel. Isn't that obvious? And I'm interested in my self-realization, but what do all these people have to do with it? You know, it's their problem, it's not mine. But you see, the more, even if we're getting for ourselves, even if we're trying to get spirituality, if we don't open the channel and expand our sense of identity, you see, that's what service is. We serve ourselves. We get up in the morning, we shower, we fix our hair, we get dressed, we have our food, we do our little exercises, we do everything we want to do because I'm me, after all. This is the one, I'm this one. But the whole spiritual path, the entire spiritual path, is to break that limited, tight identification with this one entity. I am this and everything else is separate. That's the fundamental illusion. And service is the means by which we break that down. I'm not only here to take care of myself, but I'm here to take care of everyone because we are a part of all that is. These are the affirmations in the Festival of Light. We are a part of all that is. Well, if we are a part of all that is, how would we behave? You see, this is the expansive reality, first of marriage, and even more dynamically for those who choose to do it, of having children. Because all of a sudden, this little 7-week-old thing that's just kind of flailing around like this, the parent has to completely embrace that other entity as its own. But the point is not, as Master called it, us 4 and no more. Now there's 2 of us and 2 children, so we just draw the circle a little wider, but just as tight. When I had 2 people in my life when I was a newbie on the spiritual path. And one of them I loved very, very much, and one of them I couldn't get along with at all. One was a karmic enemy, and one was a karmic soulmate, really. And I was so confused in those years. I said to Swamiji once, well, maybe it's not so much a problem that I dislike this one. The problem is that I love this one too much. And so the contrast is the difficulty. So maybe I should love this one a little less, and then maybe I would like this one a little more. Swami said to me, "That is the stupidest idea I have ever heard." I just love that. He rarely has spoken so bluntly, but that deserved it. That is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. He said, the reason great love is given to us, and this is the divine purpose of romantic love and bearing children, is to show us how blissful it is to love without regard for yourself. To show us the bliss of serving others as if they were ourselves and discovering that in fact they are ourselves. And that in the perfection of our love, as we said in the wedding ceremony, those of you who are here, may our love grow ever stronger, more selfless, more expansive, until we see everyone, all human beings, all creatures, as our own. And the act of serving is how we affirm that, and then how we experience that, and then how we realize that simple fact. That there's no difference. Master writes in Whispers from Eternity, help me to spend for others as freely as I spend for myself. Ah, that's a big line, isn't it? Because why not? If I would buy it for myself, why wouldn't I buy it for someone else? What is the difference? It's well worth meditating on, all the reasons you think it's the difference. And then to just go quickly through the rest of the Gita said, don't share this teaching with those who are not interested. And for ourselves, what that means, pick and choose among the many choices you have, those that resonate with your own heart. And don't imagine you'll get to avoid the rest, but go with where your heart goes automatically. And don't bother to torture yourself with that which doesn't apply. That was Swami's genius. He could always see what our own next step was. Nothing in itself is either positive or negative, as Master said. Everything is neutral. It depends entirely on how we relate to it. And so choose that where your heart automatically goes, to devotion, to chanting, or to singing if you like it, or to Kriya Yoga if that's really where your heart goes, or to this kind of service, or this kind of relationship, whatever it might be. Because as long as you're moving forward, as we said at the beginning, we are not who we are now, we are what we aspire to be. And never, ever, ever, as the Gita says it, speak ill of your spiritual path. Never, ever, ever. And never allow anyone around you to speak ill of it. Yes, we have our days when we wish there was an alternative. I have lain awake at night and thought, is there any way out of this? Sometimes it actually freaks me out, is the only way I can put it, to realize that I will always be conscious. Whew, always be conscious. I mean, don't you ever grow tired of it? We all grow tired of it. Swamiji used to say, how are you doing today, sir? Sometimes I would ask him. He said, I'm tired of, he would say. I'm not tired, I'm just tired of all of it. But don't ever let that drift into negativity towards your spiritual path, towards your guru bhais, toward what God has asked of you. I mean, this is our lifeline to freedom. And just even the slightest denigration of that which is holy, it will not serve you. You don't want that vibration anywhere. Be the Pollyanna of your spiritual circle. Be the one who's always happy about it. Believe me, it'll serve you so much better in the end. You allow that little bit of somehow it's their fault, somehow they're not giving me quite what I want, somehow they're not. And pretty soon all that has been given to you is drained out. That's why Master says don't pour more water into a leaky bucket, and don't become the leaky bucket yourself. Everyday gratitude. If you don't like this, then just don't look at it. Look over here. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, it says, if you have a wrong attitude, then just have the opposite. And it seems so simplistic, but it's a big world. There's lots of places to look. You can look in all directions. Look to the light. Keep your attention on the light. We are what we aspire to become. We are what we concentrate on. And let us become more of who we are meant to be. God bless.